Offer valid on standard browsers, U.S. only.
When I heard about Date My Age, I thought, really? But there I was in my empty, quiet house, my laptop on the kitchen counter, and I typed in my name. Looking for a man between the ages of 40 to 60? Sure, why not?
Date My Age is different. With verified profiles, you can feel safe and secure to explore meaningful connections with interesting and mature singles.
Date My Age made it really easy. I could join and view online profiles for free. All of a sudden, my empty house wasn't so quiet anymore. I got so much attention, it just made me feel seen and alive. Date My Age helped me start a totally new chapter in my life.
Find a friend, a lover, a partner at Date My Age. Get 60% off when you join at datemyage.com today. That's datemyage.com to connect with thousands of singles worldwide. datemyage.com.
You're listening to Campus Killings, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, and Citizen Detective. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Today's episode takes us to Western Kentucky University, where on any typical night, students might expect to be awoken by a prank pull of a fire alarm. Yet on this night, it would signal tragedy. In the early morning hours of Sunday, May 5th, 2003, students awoke to a blaring fire alarm in Hugh Pullen Hall, a dorm building at Western Kentucky University. Anyone who has ever spent time in a dorm knows that the fire alarms often get triggered as pranks or sometimes by accident. We know that false alarms are common. What this means is that students sometimes ignore the alarms, which, for obvious reasons, can be a very bad idea. RAs sometimes have to knock on doors and make drowsy, annoyed students grab a jacket and some shoes and head outside until the alarm is investigated. It was right at the start of final exams at WKU, an exhausting time for students. So when the Poland fire alarm sounded at 4:08 a.m., students were more than ever inclined to just ignore it. In fact, one freshman told the Courier-Journal that the students were joking about the annoyance of these false alarms as about 50 students heard it outside. The dorm housed over 300 kids, but most were away at the Kentucky Derby for the weekend. Unfortunately, this time there was really a fire, and loudspeakers in the building ordered students to get outside ASAP. Firefighter Bob Sanborn busted through the locked door of room 214 where smoke was seeping out through the cracks, telling him that this is where the blaze was centered. He thought a glistening pile on the bed was laundry, but noticed the faintest movement. It was actually a person who was barely breathing. Firefighters carried a young girl outside by her arms and legs and laid her on the ground and intubated her. Stunned students huddled around and looked on in horror. An ambulance quickly arrived and the girl was lifted onto a gurney and driven swiftly away. Fire Marshal spokesman Ken Meredith told the school and the media that the fire was limited to one room and had been mostly extinguished by the sprinkler in that room. But it appeared to have been deliberately set. This was clearly a case of arson. The female student who was injured was reported to be in, quote, extremely critical condition. She was taken to the burn unit at Vanderbilt University Hospital in Nashville, where she was suffering from extensive burns and other wounds, as reported by the WKU spokesperson Bob Skipper. But it's what he said next that was perplexing. The injured student, he said, had suffered some kind of puncture wounds, although they were superficial, he said, and not life-threatening. So what was going on here?
Kind of curious if we'll find out where the puncture wounds are. Might give us some more insight.
Yes. Regardless of the source of these wounds, Megan, I think it's clear that something more is going on than just a fire. The WKU police led the investigation. They also received assistance from the state fire marshal and the Kentucky State Police. Now, these agencies were soon joined by the Bowling Green Police, the FBI, the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Now, the campus police chief, Robert Dean, had spent 27 years in the Detroit Police Department, including 10 in the Homicide Division, and he was also a criminal investigator for the Army Reserve. So you would think this gentleman was well suited to lead this investigation.
You would.
But under him, Sergeant Mike Dowell of the WKU police ended up heading the investigation, although this man had never investigated a crime like this one. Initially, authorities declined to release the name of the injured student, but Megan, this is a college campus. People were living in close quarters, and they pretty much know who they live amongst. And pretty soon, everyone knew that the girl in the hospital was Katie Autry, a freshman at the school. And soon after, there were rumors that this was in fact Katie's cousin, Baker Autry, confirmed that it was in fact his cousin who had been burned and was in the hospital. Katie, in fact, lived in Hugh Pullen Hall in room 214 where the fire had started. Her roommate was not home at the time, so she was unharmed. But if the fire had been deliberately set, everyone wondered, had Katie set it? And the superficial puncture wounds, which no one seemed to be able to explain, had she perhaps harmed herself and then set the room ablaze? No one really knew at this point. Students were permitted to return to their rooms by Sunday at 10 p.m., even though to many, it was still very unclear as to what had happened, and people were very shooken up.
I'll bet. I wouldn't want to return to my room that soon if something like that happened.
So who's Katie? Katie was born Melissa Autry. Her middle name was Katie, and that's what she went by. She was born on May 10th, 1984 in Kentucky. Her mom, Donna Autry, reportedly did not know who Katie's father was. Katie also had a sister, Lisa, who was born a few years later. Unfortunately, due to mental health issues, which were a diagnosis of schizophrenia, Donnie was unable to care for her girls. So they went to live with relatives until the state placed them in foster care. After that, Katie and Lisa lived in Kentucky with foster parents Jim and Shirley Inman. Katie attended Hancock County High School, where she was a cheerleader for 4 years and she excelled academically. She was also very active in her Baptist church. The couple that had taken her in, the Inmans, they were an older couple and they were very strict, and they required the girls to attend church regularly and didn't let them date and kind of kept a close eye on them. So while Katie was grateful to them for taking the girls in, she was not very close with them. At the time of this event, Katie had been a full-time student at WKU that past fall, but she had just switched to part-time that spring. Her roommate was Danica Jackson. The two were considered really close friends, and they partied a lot together. Now that Katie was 18, she had initiated proceedings to emancipate herself from the foster care system. As a ward of the state, she had college paid for, and her leaving the system would mean that she would be on her own financially. But Katie wanted to be independent and make her own decisions. So this meant that she had to pay for college. That's why she ended up going part-time so she could work 15 hours a week in the downtown University Center.
Wow.
Her boss said she was always smiling and happy. And in fact, most people described her as a sweet, smiling, kind, and quiet girl who had no enemies. She didn't seem to surround herself with drama, and she didn't have any secrets. And she had no known enemies. On the Monday after the fire, students started final exams as scheduled. Now, everyone had been able to get back in their rooms and access their books and laptops. But the injured student, again confirmed to be Katie Autry, remained in critical condition with third-degree burns over 40% of her body.
Oh, that is terrible. That's like one of the worst. When we hear of these cases that involve burnings, they're heartbreaking.
And as always, a tragic event results in an overhaul of procedures and protocols, but often, Megan, as we know, too little, too late.
And not the right ones. I just want to say, usually a tragic event doesn't necessarily bring the right changes. That's what I teach in my policy class.
Because it's usually out of emotion, right?
Exactly. Knee-jerk reaction instead of like a fully planned policy.
Students who talked to the media reported that the dorm building had been chaotic and lawless. 2 Pullen Hall residents had been arrested in the fall of 2002 and charged with first-degree robbery and possession of firearms. And it must have been pretty bad because after the fire incident, it came out that 3 of the RAs in Pullen Hall had quit during the school year and had not been replaced. And Megan, as people who have lived in a dorm know, it's serious for an RA to quit because they're giving up free housing.
Yeah.
Another student told the Courier-Journal that she went home as soon as her exams were done because she didn't feel safe in the dorms any longer, saying that this particular dorm was known as a place where bad stuff goes on. Several female students moved out of the dorm as soon as they could make alternate living arrangements, and 4 of the remaining RAs also quit. And again, this is strange. There were only a few days remaining in the term, so it seems like everyone's very concerned about what's going on. WKU spokesperson Bob Skipper had said that the fire triggered a review of the school's dorm and safety policies, and a campus police officer would be patrolling Poland Hall 24 hours a day. Now, this was all because nobody really knew what was going on. The school administration seemingly didn't know what was going on, and if they did, they were not being fully transparent about what had really transpired in room 214. Skipper persisted in calling Katie's injuries, quote, superficial lacerations. He acknowledged that the wounds did not appear to be self-inflicted and said that the possibility of self-harm had been investigated but was not a likely scenario. He did call the investigation complicated and that said that the school would not be releasing more information as a way to avoid compromising the investigation. He said, quote, we really want to be thorough in our investigation. We want to make sure we come to the proper conclusions, and should we go to court, we want to make sure the evidence is sound. Court? So what charges were going to be filed?
I don't know. I'm curious because I would also love to know how they came to the conclusion that they were superficial immediately. And I mean, actually, that's kind of easy to tell. And who's the suspect? I mean.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
If you love smash burgers, the crispy edges, bold, beefy flavor, you need to try Omaha Steaks' all-new smash burgers. They're pre-smashed, made with 100% extra-aged beef, and grill-ready. No mess, no griddle. I tossed a few on the grill last weekend, straight from freezer to bun in just 5 minutes. The sear? Perfect. The flavor? Rich, juicy, and seriously next level. Way better than anything I've had from the store. Plus, I grabbed the Built for the Grill pack at omahasteaks.com/smash and scored 16 smash burgers free. With high-quality meats always on hand, I'm already eyeing my next order. Maybe there's steak burgers or that killer bacon-wrapped filet. Family-owned since 1917, Omaha Steaks brings 5 generations of premium quality delivered right to your door. Smash burger lovers, this is your moment. Get ready to smash expectations with new Omaha Steaks smash burgers. Visit omahasteaks.com/smash and order the Built for the Grill pack with 16 free smash burgers. That's 16 free Omaha Steaks smash burgers at omahasteaks.com/smash. See site for details.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace, too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
We want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about our friends over at CrimeCon.
What is CrimeCon, you might ask? It's only the greatest convention in the world of true crime where thousands of people come together to discuss their favorite cases, rub elbows with some of the biggest stars in the world of true crime, and interact with some of their favorite podcasters.
CrimeCon is a great place to meet people just like you who have an interest in true crime, and you get to hang out with some of the biggest names in true crime. People like Nancy Grace, Paul Holes, and Dr. Henry Lee, just to name a few.
It's a 3-day event, and the next one is less than a year away. CrimeCon 2023 will be in Orlando, Florida, at the World Center Marriott, September 22nd to September 24th, 2023. And listeners of Campus Killings can save 10% on your standard badges for CrimeCon 2023 when you use our promo code at checkout when you go to crimecon.com. That promo code is Campus Killings, all one word, no spaces.
Book your trip now before spots sell out, and who knows, maybe we'll see you there in September. On May 7th, with Katie still in critical condition, WKU President Gary Ranzel sent an email to the university. It stated that the injured student had been burned, but also had abrasions and puncture wounds on her face and her neck. The whole incident, the email said, was suspicious, which, Megan, seems a bit understated.
I think so.
Behind the scenes, WKU police and other investigators were questioning students to try to get to the bottom of what had happened to Katie that night. So here's what the police learned about Katie's movement on the night of the fire. Now, Katie and Danica, remember, was her roommate. They had pre-gamed in another room in their dorm, room 211. This was the room of Amy Nussbaum. Amy was Danica's former roommate. The two had separated because they didn't live well together, so Katie had moved in with Danica. Danica later said that Katie was very inebriated and they were drinking alcohol mixed with Sprite that evening. Then Amy dropped Katie and Danica at Pi Kappa Alpha party around 12:30. This was known as the Pike House. And this was off campus about a mile away from the dorms. Between 100 and 250 people were estimated to have been at the party over the course of the evening. Many people at the party reported that Katie was very drunk and she tended to become very dramatic and cry when she drank. She was all over the place trying to get boys to dance with her. At one point, she dropped her purse, spilling the contents all over the floor. She had then gotten into an altercation at the party with a male student who she had been seeing named Maurice. She was reportedly angry because he didn't want to be exclusive with her and he had been seeing other women. Katie reportedly slapped him across the face at one point in the night. Katie allegedly were making some girls angry too, dancing with their boyfriends and giving the girls the finger. Now, the Pike brothers at one point did ask Katie to leave. Her roommate also admitted that she was a little bit out of hand that evening.
You know it's serious when the fraternity brothers are asking you to leave. Like, that's not usually something.
If you're too drunk for a fraternity, then, okay.
I mean, it sounds like things were really going downhill that night. It sounds really bad.
So Danica had wanted to stay for a bit because she was hanging out with a boy that she liked. And according to her, she was constantly having to babysit Katie when she drank, and she says she was just tired of it. So Danica did, I think, what any of us would do and put Katie in the hands of somebody who can drive her home, a sober pledge who was the designated driver. Right. So she put Katie in his car and told him to take her to Poland Hall. She even wrote down the license plate number, which I think is very smart of her.
Wow, that's really smart.
Yeah, and she told him Katie better make it there safe. Danica then called Katie from the party to make sure she made it back to the room okay. And this was at 2:36 a.m. And so again, Danica's doing all the right things. She's making sure her friend's home safe and then checking on her friend.
Yeah.
So Katie answered the phone. And remember, she was reportedly very drunk that night. Danica says she sounded a little bit strange and had told Danica that there was someone in the room with her. She also sounded a bit confused. Danica asked who was there with her, and Katie said, "I don't know who he is." She then handed the phone to a guy who said he was the one who had driven Katie back to the dorm and that she had thrown up in his truck and he wanted to make sure that she was okay. Danica told him to put Katie in bed, make sure she was on her stomach, and close the door behind him. She said she would be back soon. But as Danica was talking to this guy, she heard a distinctly different male voice in the background, and it sounded to her as though there were two men in the dorm room. She could hear Katie saying, "Leave me alone, I want to go to sleep." Then the phone hung up. It was now 2:38 a.m.
Oh, wow. This is really concerning. Leave me alone.
Danica shrugged it off. She assumed that the guy on the phone really was the frat designated driver and that he might have had a buddy with him and that they would just leave the room just as she had told them to. It was nagging at her a bit, though, so she tried to call Amy, who lived down the hall, because she wanted Amy to go check on Katie, but Amy did not answer. Danica went home with someone else and did not sleep in her dorm room that night. Again, the dorm room that she shared with Katie. So Amy had gone to bed at about 1 o'clock, and that's why she had not answered Danica's early morning phone calls. Amy was awoken at 4:08 a.m. by the fire alarm in the dorm. This is when she went into the hallway, and she noticed that Katie's door was closed and smoke was pouring out from around the door frame. Outside, Amy told an RA that Katie's door was closed and that she might be in there. Other students outside also saw smoke billowing from the window from room 214. And then Amy saw the firefighters bringing Katie out. It was reported later that when firefighters arrived at Katie's door, it was locked. Something interesting to note, Megan, the school's spokesperson, Bob Skipper, said that Poland Hall residents' doors cannot be locked from the outside without a key. And Katie's door was locked from the outside, but she was inside her room. And just to point out, a key was never found.
But someone had to have locked it from the outside then. And someone had a key or access to key. Okay.
According to what Bob reports.
Okay.
Katie spent days in the hospital burn unit in a medically induced coma. She had not been able to speak since whispering, "Just take me home," in the ambulance. Doctors could not insert a catheter, and she had trouble with an IV because she was so badly burned. On Sunday, May 4th, she underwent surgery to relieve pressure in her abdomen resulting from all the burns. Her skin had to be opened to allow her chest to rise and fall. Then on May 6th, she had more surgery to remove charred skin. Tragically, on May 7th at 7:10 p.m., Katie Autry passed away in her hospital room. When the university announced this horrible news, about 150 students held a prayer vigil in the school's bell tower in honor of Katie. By this point, 16 investigators had processed the scene and interviewed more than 100 people. They were really working hard to figure out what happened to Katie. Because when Katie died, things stepped up a notch. Now, although the inquiries had been treated as criminal shortly after the incident, now it was a homicide case. It was clear that Katie had been murdered. An autopsy was performed on Katie by Dr. Thomas Deering of the State Medical Examiner's Office in Nashville. Note that Kentucky agencies did not have jurisdiction because she did pass away in Tennessee. It turned out that there was a lot of information at the scene that was kept from the public, as it usually is. Information that definitely pointed to murder from the very beginning. And many believe, and I would have to agree, that this was kept quiet by the school to avoid student panic.
Mm-hmm.
So what did they know? Katie had been found nearly nude. She was wearing a blue t-shirt, and that is it. A white t-shirt was tightly knotted around her throat. A fire alarm in the room had been ripped off the ceiling and incapacitated. The sprinkler on the ceiling had a towel wrapped around it. Accelerant had been poured all over Katie in the form of Aussie hairspray, mostly on her breasts and vaginal area. It was reported that she was alive while she was set on fire. The flames burned her and the bed and the wall nearest to the bed, leaving black sooty char marks all up the wall. Later at trial, Dr. Lee Carter testified, becoming very emotional as he talked about the third-degree burns to her neck, which were so deep and blackened that her skin was hard as wood and was still smoking when she was brought in.
This is devastating. This is truly devastating.
You know what it reminds me of? The Jessica Chambers case?
Yep, that's what I was thinking of as well. What an awful, horrific death.
It gets worse. Katie exhibited signs of sexual trauma, indicating that she was raped and sodomized. She also had bruised and swollen cheeks and eyes and puncture wounds on her face and neck from something like a pen or pencil. Large amounts of sanitizer gel was found in her vagina. Crime scene photos showed a very messy and cluttered room with clothes everywhere. There were teddy bears, throw pillows. Everything was doused by the sprinklers. Suitcases were partially packed and they were tossed around. It's almost understandable that campus police failed to collect some crucial items when you look at how the scene was in such a disarray. For example, there was some bubble gum stuck to a towel that was covering the sprinkler. Arson investigators who worked the scene believe that the fire was set around 3:56 a.m. That would give the blaze enough time to grow to a point that would have set the alarms off at 4:08. The school offered a $2,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for the fire that caused Katie's death. And boy, did they get some information. 4 days after Katie's death, coming as a shock to many, it was reported that she was an exotic dancer in a nearby strip club. She worked at Tattletales, a gentleman's club in Bowling Green, for just 6 weeks. She had last performed there on April 28th, and there was some indication that she had quit.
Amy, is this information really relevant to this case?
At first, I was actually not even going to report on it because I don't believe that her occupation has anything to do with it. But remember, we have to look at victimology, and the investigators were questioning, is it possible that she met someone unsavory at work, and maybe someone had come to her room that night. It was an avenue that needed to be explored. Eventually, it did lead nowhere, and to me, it's totally irrelevant. But it's not fair, I don't think, to the victim, because this is something that the media reported on.
Right. Of course it is.
The biggest news would come on May 11th. Police had made an arrest in Katie's case. 20-year-old Scottsville resident Lucas B. Goodrum had agreed to come into the Kentucky State Police Bowling Green post to answer some questions around 9:30 p.m. on Saturday night. At 1 a.m., he was placed under arrest for the murder of Katie Autry. He was held at Warren County Regional Jail on $1 million bond. Investigators would not answer any questions about the relationship between Goodrum and Katie, but they acknowledged that Goodrum was not a student enrolled at WKU, and in fact, he had never even been a student there.
Who is he? Are you going to tell us about him right now? Like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how did police land on Lucas Goodrum as the suspect? We've never heard this name before.
Right.
This all started because they spoke to members of the fraternity where Katie was partying earlier that night. They found that designated driver who had driven her home, a man by the name of Ryan Payne. Payne told police that when he arrived at his truck with Katie, after she had been sent home by Danica, there was a guy partially passed out inside. Now, this guy was Stephen Souls, who Payne knew from back in Scottsville. Scottsville is a town that's close to the university. Now, Souls had been at the party, and he had gotten very drunk, and he left the party to take a nap in the truck. So Payne drove Katie home with Souls sitting between them. According to Payne, Katie teased Souls about being so drunk, and several sources reported that Payne told the police that when Katie got out at her dorm, Souls got out too, telling Payne that he wanted to, quote, holla at her, which apparently means to be with her.
Sorry, these two knew each other?
When you say these two, you mean the driver and this other guy?
Yeah.
It sounds like they knew each other from maybe growing up. They weren't necessarily friends, but yeah, they were acquaintances, it sounds like.
Okay, thank you.
So Sergeant Kevin Pickett tracked down Souls and brought him in for questioning. Now, Souls admitted to being at the party, even though he was not a student at the university, and he also admitted to being in the truck with Katie. He said that Katie was very drunk and emotional, and she kept saying she just wanted to go back to her room. Now, Souls said when they arrived at her dorm, Katie invited him upstairs to her room. He said he took the stairs because he didn't like elevators. This might be, the reason I mentioned this might be why nobody reportedly saw him. He says they started fooling around and they eventually had sex. Then he reported that Katie got up to go to the bathroom to be sick. Souls chatted with her for a bit and then left. He says he went to his friend Brian's, arriving at 3:30 a.m. Now, Pickett did not believe Souls' story. He said in an interview that Souls seemed scared, nervous, and would not look him in the eye, and he felt that he was hiding something. So as any good investigator would do, or maybe he accused Souls of covering for someone. Maybe somebody else was involved. Now, remember that Danica said there were two men that she heard on the phone. This led Souls to say, yes, when I left the room, there was another guy in the hallway. Okay, so Pickett is at a good point here. He's going to push Souls. So this sounds like good police work to me, Megan. So
it sounds like that to me as well. I love when
Yeah.
I love these kind of strategies that are, playing by they're within the bounds, but they're creative, and I like these strategies when they're used effectively by law enforcement in the an interview.
Well, Pickett took it further. He made up some photos of fingerprints using his own prints, showed them to Souls as prints that had been lifted from the room that supposedly matched Souls' prints. And he also made fake surveillance footage of the dorm and hinted that Souls was on the video. Now, Souls didn't confess. He didn't confess, though. His story changed, though, to shift blame onto Lucas Goodrum, the man who police had arrested. He said that Goodrum had talked to Katie at the party, and when he, Souls, and Katie were fooling around, Goodrum barged in, saw what they were doing, and said he wanted in. Katie said no, and Souls said at that point, Goodrum started hitting her and, quote, got crazy. He says that Goodrum slapped her and smashed her head against the wall. Souls admits to watching Goodrum rape Katie and suffocate her. He said he did not know what to do. And then he said that Goodrum made him do some stuff to Katie too. He then saw Goodrum spraying Katie and her bed and took off. He said his own prints must have been on the hairspray bottle because he had touched it. Now, Souls was not placed under arrest at this time.
Really?
They let him go and started focusing on Goodrum.
Who's Goodrum again?
Goodrum is the one that they had arrested. Goodrum is just another guy who's at the party.
So that's what I mean. Like, he hasn't been in this story, really, has he?
No. This is
Okay,
the
so
first time.
he points the finger, and then he tells the story. Basically, he's just confessed all the details of the case, too. So, even if he's saying it's not him, he's just literally confessed the details.
Yeah, whether or not it's true or not remains to be seen.
Well, I can venture a very good guess here, and I'm going to say no, but okay.
Okay. So they learned that Goodrum had indeed been at the party that night, and he had a physical altercation with his girlfriend, Brittany. Now, earlier that night, according to a police report, he had pushed her down, straddled her, choked her, slapped her across the face, and called her a whore.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I just wanted to say I said that wasn't true, but he's a violent guy too. Oh my goodness.
Well, Megan, not only that, his ex had filed for a different ex had filed for a temporary restraining order against him after an incident of domestic abuse. Now, the two had a child together and they were divorced. So he's just so you know, he's 21 years old. Just
wow, this is unbelievable the way this is unfolding. These two both seem like incredibly strong suspects, and oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll return after a brief word from our sponsors.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Offer valid on standard browsers, U.S. only.
When I heard about Date My Age, I thought, really? But there I was in my empty, quiet house, my laptop on the kitchen counter, and I typed in my name. Looking for a man between the ages of 40 to 60? Sure, why not?
Date My Age is different. With verified profiles, you can feel safe and secure to explore meaningful connections with interesting and mature singles.
Date My Age made it really easy. I could join and view online profiles for free. All of a sudden, my empty house wasn't so quiet anymore. I got so much attention, it just made me feel seen and alive. Date My Age helped me start a totally new chapter in my life.
Find a friend, a lover, a partner at Date My Age. Get 60% off when you join at datemyage.com today. That's datemyage.com to connect with thousands of singles worldwide. datemyage.com.
Okay, so it gets a little complicated, so stick with me here. As we heard, Stephen Souls told that WKU police and the Kentucky State Police that he saw Goodrum rape, beat, and suffocate Katie. Detective Kevin Pickett filed an affidavit in support of a request for a warrant to force Goodrum to submit to a rape kit examination, and a judge signed the warrant. So police brought Goodrum in and asked him about the events of the evening. Now, Goodrum thought that they were asking him about his fight with his girlfriend. Remember, earlier that night, there had been an altercation.
Mm-hmm.
So he says after the altercation, he headed to the university in order to avoid the police who were looking for him because of what happened with him and Brittany. So he clearly knew he was in trouble. So he thought that he was there for this incident. But at the end of their interview, the police arrested him and a warrant was executed to collect DNA and hair samples. And he initially, they didn't tell him what he was being arrested for. And he actually asked them, is this all for domestic violence? First of all, he thought clearly that domestic violence wasn't a big deal, but he thought again that he was being arrested based on the incident that happened earlier in the evening with Brittany. Once he was told that they suspected him of killing Katie, he immediately denied it. And footage of Goodrum's interview with police show that either he was genuinely surprised about being named in Katie's murder or he is an accomplished liar. Now, he sat, folded arms, and denied it all, saying, "Cross my heart and hope to die." He said he didn't even know where Poland Hall was. He acted absolutely shocked that someone had pointed a finger at him in Katie's murder. Now, this is according to him. He said he had gone to the university that night after Stephen Soules called him and asked him to bring him some pot. He admitted to seeing Katie at the party, but he says he did not dance with her, but at one point she walked by him and rubbed his stomach. He did notice that she was very drunk and was dancing very provocatively with some of his friends. According to him, he had no further interactions with her at all. He said that around 2 a.m. he left the party and walked to a different dorm for a bit with his friends, and then he got a ride from Ryan Payne to his car. Again, Ryan Payne was the designated driver who drove Brittany home.
Well, this information, then, it can be verified, so, okay.
Yeah. So after Ryan drove him to his car, which was about 15 minutes away, he then drove home, and he said, "Check with my dad and stepmom, and they'll be able to vouch for me that I was home by 3:45 a.m. And he said to the police, "Someone must hate me. I was not there, and I had nothing to do with it."
Well, let's see if that's true.
In his interview footage, Goodrum came across as cocky and confident, and detectives were not liking his attitude. Even when the detective told him his fingerprints were found in Katie's room and that he was seen on the surveillance tapes, again, none of which was true, he demanded to see the tapes, and he said that there's no way his fingerprints were in that room, period. But they didn't like the fact that he didn't seem to have any concern at all for Katie and what had happened to her. And the fact that he admitted to seeing her at the party, plus his record of being violent with women, this was enough for detectives to think that, he was probably lying.
I don't like it. Oh, I understand that, but it might not be that he's cocky. It might be that he's absolutely telling the truth. So he's certain, this is not possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And now at this point, the public was told that Goodrum was arrested after an unnamed witness reported seeing Goodrum rape, kill, and burn Katie. After Goodrum's arrest, investigators re-questioned Soules. Sergeant Mike Dowell of the WKU police was present and said that Soules made no eye contact, put his head in his hands, and acted nervous. And his stories became more detailed about Goodrum beating and threatening Katie. He said he watched as Goodrum ripped off her pants and put a condom on and then raped Katie. But Soules' alibi, remember he said he was at a friend Brian's house by 3:30 a.m.? That alibi had fallen through. Police had talked to that friend and was told that Soules had asked him to lie about being there. They confronted Soules with this, and he said something like, "I don't know, it just happened." He admitted he raped and sodomized Katie, but said that Goodrum forced him to, threatening his family if he didn't help Goodrum cover up the crime. Now, we didn't mention this, but Goodrum's family was considered pretty rich and powerful in the area, and Soules knew this, so perhaps he was taking advantage of this. Who knows? So according to Soules, he was afraid to not follow what Goodrum said because Goodrum's family came from a lot of power and prestige.
Okay.
So Soules admitted to spraying her with a hairspray and also putting sanitizer on the doorknob so that it would not open. So the more they talk to Soules, the more he's admitting involvement. But he continued to say that Goodrum was the one who set her on fire. And then Soules told them about something else, something the police did not even know, that he had stolen Katie's jewelry and said that he hid it at his grandmother's house. Soules then took them to her house, and there they found the missing items. So police arrested Soules on May 12th. Both men, Soules and Goodrum, entered pleas of not guilty at their arraignments, and they were each held on $1 million bond. And bond was later revoked at the request of the state. Meanwhile, at this time, a memorial service was held for Katie, and about 200 people attended. Katie was buried in her cheerleading uniform with flowers and framed Bible verses in the casket with her. Everyone was in tears, generally bewildered about how anyone could have so savagely killed such a sweet, innocent young woman. WKU put a task force in place to study safety and security on campus. They were supposed to give recommendations to the school administration since it wasn't really clear how the two men implicated in her murder, who were not students, had gotten into her dorm. The policy was that dorm buildings were locked 24/7 and students had to use keys to get in. But Megan, as we have seen in plenty of other cases, sometimes that's just not enough to keep people out.
It's true.
Other schools in the area also started revisiting their policies in the wake of Katie's murder. They were considering key access to dorms, surveillance systems, student ID requirements, and so on. So as we mentioned before, Megan, often these tragic events lead to policy changes, sometimes not well thought out and sometimes without real planning. It's just a knee-jerk reaction to a tragic event.
People need to do something. This happens all the time. People want to do something. They're angry. They need something done. The sentiment makes sense. It's just that whether it works is what we should really be asking. Amy, you mentioned that Goodrum came from kind of an affluent or prestigious family. Do we know a little bit more about his background or his family?
Yeah, so a little bit more about Lucas Goodrum. He was the child of Donna and Mike Goodrum. Their marriage had failed when he was a young boy and his mom had remarried. So his mom, Donna, married Bruce Dugas, who was the grandson of Cal Turner Sr. Now, Cal Sr. is the founder of Dollar General Corp., and he is worth millions. And Cal Turner Jr. and his wife Margaret were both graduates of WKU who regularly donated funds to the school. So they gave almost $500,000 to WKU in the past. That's a lot of money, and it is a bit surprising that he didn't enroll there because you would expect with his family donating so much, it would have been a shoo-in.
Yeah.
And some people were surprised that he was blamed for the murder given his family's financial connection to the school, but I don't think that the family's donation should have anything to do with the investigation of this crime. But anyway, besides the family being very wealthy, they also had some drama reportedly going on. Apparently, Bruce was very violent against Donna. Remember, I said that they divorced when Goodrum was young. She had filed a restraining order against him. Besides the restraining order, not long after that, Bruce was sent to prison for vehicular homicide. While he was high on cocaine, he killed a retired police officer in a car accident. He only served 7 months, which does not seem like a very long time for vehicular homicide, but either way. So Donna and Bruce lived in Texas, and soon after Bruce got out, Donna sent Goodrum, who was just a teen, to live with his dad in Kentucky because he had some disciplinary issues at school that she was not able to handle.
Doesn't sound very good.
Yeah, so it sounds like he had a tough start, but he did play football in high school, and he was considered to have, many friends, but he failed junior year, managed to pull together enough credits to graduate, but just barely. Then his father kicked him out of the house, saying he was lazy and played video games and smoked pot all day. So then he got a place on his own and started supporting himself by dealing pot. So when he was arrested for the murder of Katie, he was unemployed. And if you look at his work history, it was spotty. He had some stints as a painter, but he didn't really have a career. He also had a little bit of a criminal history. He had stolen property in 1999. I'd mentioned that his ex-wife had obtained a protective order against him because she said that he was violent. He also did not share custody of his child. Okay, so, that's a little bit about his background.
I'm not sure if I asked you this earlier, but how is he connected to Souls? Do they know each other? Is there a connection here?
Yeah, so there's a loose connection. So Goodrum was good friends in high school with Stephen Souls, who was Souls' older brother. So when Goodrum was a senior, Souls was a freshman. So they weren't really friends. Honestly, their relationship revolved a lot around pot transactions.
Oh, okay.
Souls was expelled after a conviction for a hit and run in 2000, and he also had public intoxication and possession of alcohol by a minor charged in 2001. After Souls got kicked out of school, he was placed in a state-run alternative school for disciplinary reasons, but his father had pulled him out after a year. He, too, was unemployed when he was arrested in 2003. Many people reported that Souls stole from people. He was lazy. He was entitled. A lot of people that knew him said that nobody really liked him and didn't trust him. So despite the fact that these two didn't seem to really know each other very well, Souls had told the police that he and Goodrum were very good friends and that he had spent the night over at his home more than once. Goodrum said that's not true and that they were acquaintances only. And the only reason they both ended up at the party is because of their mutual friend who was one of the frat brothers at the house. And the frat actually claims that they never had invited either man to the party, but they were there as guests of one of their members.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Offer valid on standard browsers, U.S. only.
When I heard about Date My Age, I thought, really? But there I was in my empty, quiet house, my laptop on the kitchen counter, and I typed in my name. Looking for a man between the ages of 40 to 60? Sure, why not?
Date My Age is different. With verified profiles, you can feel safe and secure to explore meaningful connections with interesting and mature singles.
Date My Age made it really easy. I could join and view online profiles for free. All of a sudden, my empty house wasn't so quiet anymore. I got so much attention, it just made me feel seen and alive. Date My Age helped me start a totally new chapter in my life.
Find a friend, a lover, a partner at Date My Age. Get 60% off when you join at datemyage.com today. That's datemyage.com to connect with thousands of singles worldwide. datemyage.com.
Okay, Megan, let's get to some of the court proceedings. There was a long delay while investigators tried to get their ducks in a row because, as we know, they don't want to bring these cases to trial until they have all their evidence sorted out.
I don't see any evidence yet that Goodrum's actually involved. I mean, I see evidence that he's a bad guy, but I'm not seeing any evidence. I hope you're going to discuss that. Okay.
I definitely will. Finally, after a grand jury hearing, the pair was indicted on July 16th on multiple charges. So Souls was charged with 9 counts, which included first-degree murder, rape, sodomy, arson, first-degree robbery. And then you have Goodrum, who was charged with 8, all of the same charges except the robbery charges, because they were not able to find any evidence that Goodrum had taken anything from Katie's room. Megan, these charges are serious. The death penalty was on the table for both of these guys. Stephen Souls, I don't think you're going to be surprised here, but Stephen Souls ended up pleading guilty in March 2004. Now, he did this because they struck a deal. They took death off the table, and they dropped a few of the charges, such as first-degree arson. However, what do you think happened? What do you think this was conditioned on?
He had to testify against Goodrum.
Exactly. So he had to testify against Goodrum. So Lucas Goodrum and his wealthy family went to great lengths to put up an effective defense. They hired seasoned investigators and PIs to dig into Souls' background, locate witnesses, investigate alibis, and they dug up a lot of information that the WKU police had missed. The family also hired a very experienced and respected defense attorney who managed to get a change of venue after the family commissioned public opinion surveys. They also hired jury consultants and PR experts. And guess who else they hired? Dr. Henry Lee.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Yes.
they hired one of the nation's foremost medical pathologists.
Yep. And he, as mentioned earlier, he was denied bail, so he spent this entire pretrial period in jail. So his trial started in March of 2005. A gag order was in place to keep the parties from discussing the case publicly. And the death penalty, again, was a possible outcome. And this was a capital murder trial. The prosecution told the jury that the evidence would show that Lucas Goodrum raped and killed Katie Autry because he saw her dancing at the frat party and she resisted his advances for sex. They maintained that Souls had only participated because Goodrum forced him to do so. Now, as is clear, because you asked, Megan, the prosecution's case against Goodrum relied heavily, and I'd say almost solely, on Souls' testimony. Souls had told the jury that Goodrum raped Katie wearing a condom so not to leave any DNA. And then he wiped her genital area with hand sanitizer. Then he made Souls do the same thing to her, holding up something shiny that looked like a letter opener. So Souls claimed that Goodrum then made him rape Katie to cover up for Souls. The prosecution had zero physical evidence linking Lucas Goodrum to the crime.
Yeah, I'm curious what they had then. I mean, I know there was two voices in the room, but what else do they have at all linking him?
Megan, they don't have very much. They know that Goodrum was at the party. They know that he was in a foul mood after fighting with his girlfriend. Again, they have Souls' story. They have Danica's story, as you mentioned, about the phone call with there being two men in the room. Goodrum was in the area and not accounted for after 2:41 a.m. So the designated driver testified that he picked up Goodrum at a dorm at about 100 yards from Poland Hall around 2:50 a.m. and drove him to his car. Now, a neighbor told police they did not see Goodrum's car at his home at 5:30 a.m. that morning. So you have a little bit of eyewitness. Nothing. I don't think anything's very strong.
This doesn't sound like very strong evidence in a capital case to me at all.
Right? Megan, there's one more thing.
Okay.
Actually, you can probably guess what I'm going to say. What often happens in these types of cases? Who else has something to say, you think? Jailhouse snitch.
Oh, gosh, the jailhouse snitch. Oh,
yep.
No. Okay.
Goodrum's cellmate in the Warren County Jail told the jury, quote, "I asked him if he did it, and he was like, yeah, I was in the room with her. He just didn't think it was that big of a deal." And this guy, his cellmate, was one of 3 jail informants who said that Goodrum confessed. And Megan, you know how I feel about the use of jailhouse informants, but
you and I agree that jailhouse informants are not reliable. You need much, much more corroborating evidence.
yes. So the defense, let's talk about the defense's side of the story. The defense told the jury that Stephen Souls was the lone actor who had raped and killed Katie. Goodrum, they said, was never even in room 214 that night. And they pointed out all of the problems with the state's case against their client. Okay, for one, which I think is a strong one, the star witness, Souls, had changed his story a number of times, first lying to the police saying he wasn't involved, and then asking a friend to lie for him to provide an alibi. And under cross, he admitted these things on the witness stand. They had zero DNA or other physical evidence that put Goodrum in that room. There was no DNA that linked him to the crime. 94 hairs were collected from the room. 4 were in Katie's hand, and they were shown under a microscope to not belong to Goodrum. His fingerprints were nowhere in the room or on any items within the room, including that can of hairspray. There was no surveillance footage or other evidence that put him at the scene. There were at least 2 students who told police that they were with Goodrum at a different dorm, and a logbook reflects their entry into the dorm at 2:15 a.m. And this is exactly when Payne said, that designated driver said he drove Goodrum to his vehicle. Oh, and also Goodrum drove to a gas station and purchased gas and a soda at 2:40 a.m. So they have receipts to back up his story about every move he made that night.
This sounds like a strong defense to me.
Yeah. And although we don't put a lot of weight on alibis by family members, his father and stepmother did testify that he was home by 3:45 a.m. And again, this would line up with his convenience store purchase and how far the house was from the campus and the convenience store.
Okay.
And Souls never was able to explain how Goodrum arrived at Katie's room when he and Katie were already there. He didn't know Katie. How would he know where she lived? And the person who was manning the security desk that night testified that they never saw Goodrum entering the building. And back to what we talked about before, Souls and Goodrum were not even friends. It seems like Souls was just trying to mitigate his own guilt by implicating somebody else. Nobody was able to confirm Souls' assertion that these two were close friends. Okay, so Souls did plead guilty, and his DNA was found inside of Katie. Souls was clearly getting a good deal by testifying against Goodrum. And you had several childhood friends of Souls who testified about violent behavior that he had displayed growing up. And I think this was the right move, but Goodrum testified in his own defense, and on the stand, he denied it all. He stuck to his story. He did not know Katie. He was never in her dorm room, and he said, "I'm being accused of a heinous crime that I had absolutely nothing to do with." He did admit to hitting his girlfriend that night, And he did admit to other behavior, I guess you could say, he wasn't proud of.
But that does not mean that he committed this murder. Okay.
And of course, he denied any admissions to the jailhouse informants. And the defense, I think in a right move, the defense moved for a judgment of acquittal, but the judge did deny and said that there was enough evidence for the jury to consider. So judgment of acquittal is when the defense is, even before the jury deliberates, the defense is saying this trial is crap. The judge should just dismiss all charges.
Well, they're just saying they didn't present enough evidence for the charges to have moved forward to trial.
And I actually think, from what I know, I didn't read the whole trial transcript, but it doesn't seem, I almost feel like this is one of the few cases in which a judgment of acquittal might have been appropriate.
Right.
We'll return after a brief word from our sponsors.
All right, so the trial lasted for 2 weeks with over 50 witnesses presented. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning a verdict of not guilty. So instead of being executed, he was a free man. He cried and hugged everyone. He said at a press conference, he said, it's kind of frustrating to spend 2 years in jail for nothing, for being falsely accused of something. I've got the rest of my life to move on. In later interviews, he said he believes he is owed an apology and perhaps even compensation, but he said he is also humbled by the whole experience. After the trial, Goodrum moved to his family's ranch in Texas and started training horses. Virginia White, Katie's aunt, said, quote, I felt like he was guilty. I still feel like he is guilty. And like I said, God help us all. So Katie's family was devastated by the verdict because they truly believe that Goodrum was part of this crime. The jury foreman spoke to the media saying that there was simply just not enough physical evidence that would connect Goodrum to the scene. And he said that the lack of evidence meant that they could not find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And overall, it was a weak case. And as we both said, I agree.
I agree as well.
On May 12th, 2005, Soules was sentenced to 6 concurrent life imprisonments and an additional 20 years without the possibility of parole. Now, the judge rejected a request by Soules' attorney for a sentence of 25 years in prison. I don't even know why they would bother trying for that.
I don't know either.
And then in April 2008, Soules filed a motion with the trial court to vacate his conviction because he says his guilty plea was not entered into knowingly or voluntarily and was the result of ineffective assistance of counsel. Not surprisingly, the trial court denied that motion without a hearing. He's clearly just grasping at straws.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of time what appeals are.
Case raised serious questions about whether state and local police should be required to step in instead of often less qualified campus police in these types of cases. And many people felt that the WKU police missed a lot of evidence, that they didn't run down Goodrum's alibi, and they put too much stock in Soules' statements and suffered from tunnel vision. And I would not disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
After Katie's death, Virginia White and Donnie Autry were named as co-administrators of Katie's estate. And in that capacity, they sued the university and 5 employees in a wrongful death suit. The lawsuit also named the Student Life Foundation a not-for-profit organization which owned the dorms and also the fraternity Phi Kappa Alpha. The family won these suits and they were awarded $200,000. Poland Hall had since been renovated and Katie's room was turned into a broom closet, which the family feels is disrespectful, which I would have to agree with.
Yeah, that's weird.
I understand why maybe they didn't want to keep it as a room, but I think making it even like a study lounge with some sort of, commemorating Katie's life or something.
Something would have been more tasteful.
Mm-hmm. The university has since implemented additional security measures such as electronic door locks on residence halls. They also installed security cameras, which will, with any hope, deter attacks such as this one. Many say if the RA could have seen Stephen Soules on a video monitor, sneaking into an entrance, or seeing him lurking in the hallway, perhaps this attack could have been prevented. Megan, I'm wondering if another possible way to avoid these types of crimes in dorms, you think college dorm rooms should have like a panic button? It might not have helped a student like Katie, who was seemingly maybe already in bed when her killer entered the room and she was seemingly incapacitated. But maybe the deterrent factor of panic buttons at the fingertips of every college student maybe could help avoid attacks such as this one. What do you think about that?
I think it's a possibility, and even if it's not harmful. You know what I mean? I don't think it would be overused. You know, there might be an argument that, people just hit the panic button too quickly. I don't think college students would, to be honest. I would favor the idea of a panic button. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, although having some false positives might be annoying to campus police because they'd have to respond to maybe false alarms, I think it's worth it. Again, I think it would possibly serve as a deterrent. And I think having them in hallways and in dorm rooms, you know, Katie, she was on the phone with Danica. It sounded like something was going on. Perhaps she would have used a button, or perhaps she would have been able to utilize a tool to call for help.
It certainly could have been a possibility, and it really could have helped. So I would favor that as well, Amy. This, bizarre case. I think that justice was served in that the right perpetrator is in prison, and I don't believe Goodrum was involved. I'm sorry for, obviously, her family, and it was an awful crime. But I do believe that there was some form of justice in the end here.
I do, and I am glad that university and surrounding universities did increase security measures in dorms as a result of this heinous crime. Some of these facts are taken from the book about this case that's titled Cruel Heart, The True Story of a Beautiful Co-ed, a Vicious Murder, and the Trial That Tore Apart a Town. Thank you all so much for listening today. We hope everyone has a happy holiday season. We just wanted to let you all know that Campus Killings will be on a holiday break until our next episode, which will air on January 7th, 2023. We look forward to you joining us.
Campus Killings is hosted by Dr. Megan Sachs and Dr. Amy Schlossberg, with research and writing by Jessica Betancourt. It's produced by Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to follow Campus Killings on social media. You can find Campus Killings on Twitter with the handle @CampusKillings, or on Facebook by searching for Campus Killings Podcast. Be sure to tune in every other Saturday for new episodes of Campus Killings.